This is a land acknowledgement that I'm in Nova Scotia, Canada, in the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And we're talking here about Living Untethered by Michael Singer. This is the first of several weeks of exploring some of the ideas and concepts in Michael Singer's work. Living Untethered Beyond the Human Predicament really gets at what he's talking about and what we're working with. So it's how do we live in this expanded consciousness of knowing that we're more than the circumstances of our life? How do we know that? What does that feel like on a day-to-day basis? And what really happens is there's a lot of obstacles that are happening all the time. And when our nervous system gets kind of activated by something, then we're going to close up or we're going to lose that awareness. It's like if for a moment you were to touch into the stillness that's here in your mind and your body. And then you think about something that is really wonderful, a person you really love, or place, or an animal. Bring that to mind. And then bring to mind something you don't like a slow driver in front of you, an angry driver. And then focus again on softening your body somewhere, maybe your shoulders. Let your shoulders release, or if you're clenching your teeth, let that release. This is part of what we're doing, is this very practical, what is it that takes us out of awareness, that takes us into some contracted state? And these are his words here, Michael Singer's words, how can I help you to see? And what happens when we don't accept reality? So I became very familiar with him in 2012 with his book, The Untethered Soul, which many people have read. And now with Living Untethered, he goes more deeply into that. This is a big question. Why can't things be the way I want them to be? And he talks about the billions of years of evolution from the Big Bang till now, and how everything's kind of just organized itself around certain principles, physics, quantum, all of these different things. Things are the way they are because of all the influences that made them that way. So right now, here where I am, it's stormy. It's just starting to clear off. A couple hours ago, there was a big rainstorm that was happening. So my opinion on the matter doesn't change it. And that's the truth of a lot of things. Our feelings, our experience, when we're hurt by things, it doesn't change the whatever it is that we're running up against. So if things were the way we wanted them to be, life would be easier for sure. If everybody was kind and considerate, and if the people were always awake and alert when they're on the road and they were paying attention, and there's all of those things that would make our life a lot easier. And it's our internal responses. So he's talking about a way to practice to training ourselves to deal with ourselves. So it's the external circumstances are what they are, and then there's our relationship with that and our response to that. I'm not in any way saying that we shouldn't respond, and I'm not in any way saying that things are good the way they are. Obviously, some things are really harmful and really hard the way they are. This isn't talking about that. It's just talking about what's my response and how can I free myself from suffering by looking at those responses. I don't know if this happens everywhere in the world, but in Canada, we talk a lot about the weather when we see each other. And we'll say, isn't it a lovely day today? Or, oh my gosh, the rain's really coming down hard. Or, how'd you make it through that big windstorm or whatever it was? And that's pretty innocuous, and it's a way to kind of comment on our shared experience as well. But what does the weather really stimulate in you? Let's just take a minute here to feel into the body with this. There are biological reasons why we like certain kinds of weather more. So a storm could ruin our housing security. It could cause death. Sometimes people are hit by lightning. People die of exposure in storms. So there's a reason why we react certain ways to different kinds of weather. Then there's the non-survival things, like I'm planning this thing on this day And I really want the weather to be good. So we kind of hope for that or put our good intentions into that or something. But that's actually not going to make any difference at all to the weather. So as I was looking into this and really kind of sitting with this a bit, it really came forward that I think what part of the problem is that when our needs aren't considered and when we're not seen, that causes a problem for us, especially if that's been our experience in our life. So if the weather reminds you or anything else reminds you of times in your life when nobody seemed to be noticing you, so this is often from childhood, and people didn't really care what your needs were. School starts at this time, get it together, the car's leaving now. Or we're pushed and prodded a lot in our lives. Or if we're upset about something, we're sad about something. And, we're met with compassion and empathy and somebody to sit down and kind of share that with us. That's very different from if we're met with impatience or perhaps even someone who's telling us that we're too sensitive or there's something wrong with us because we're having the reaction or the response that we are. So some of these metaphorical things can be landing on quite deep personal experiences, and that's part of what gives them their power. And that's part of inquiring into this, part of what gives us the power too. So if we're looking at things that irritate us, common irritants, some of these have to do with driving, slow drivers, fast drivers, rude drivers. Some of them have to do with being in crowds. That picture of the guy with the hula hoop kind of thing around him. We saw some of that during COVID. The people were protecting themselves from other people in these kind of weird ways. But it's also true. I've felt that on airplanes when they have us all crammed in so closely together that you can't move. It feels disrespectful. It feels like there's a problem there. And then our mind starts to go over different things. So let's do an inquiry. And I'm going to use driving as kind of the example. However, you are welcome to use whatever you want to use for this. And also to mention that if you have a lot of past history with trauma, if you have a lot of past history with driving, that it makes this not a low-hanging fruit for you. So this isn't just a frustration that you could work with. This is something that, you've been in an accident or you've lost people or something like that. You might want to use a different example for this process. So we're not in this kind of inquiry where we're doing this in a group. We're not really looking to go into a 10 out of 10 traumatic incident. We're looking at something that's irritating but not overwhelming. Part of the reason for that is because we will always want to stay present in this moment in time, here in the place that you're at. So if you look around the room, you can establish that your body is safe, that you can feel your seat, your feet. You remember to use the tools. So you might hold your own hands or do some tapping or put something in a frame. Let's take a few minutes to go into an inquiry about this now. So if you're thinking about your own driving, do you usually feel like you're in a hurry? So I've noticed that it creates a lot more urgency when I might be late than when I know I have lots of time. Sometimes we're in a hurry because we can't really help it. Some things come up or, but oftentimes there's an ongoing experience of I'm always leaving at the last minute and then I feel rushed. So just to notice that in your body, notice what sensations might be there. And you could bring to mind a time when you're in a hurry. I try to time my journeys out of here so that they don't correspond with the school bus, for instance, because the school bus is going to stop at every single place and there's nowhere to pass here. So sometimes we can look ahead and plan ahead so that we're not going to be in a hurry. That's one of the factors if we're in a hurry or if we have lots of time. And sometimes, even if we're not in a hurry, we have the momentum of feeling like we're in a hurry. There's more to it than just our physical environment at that time. Stay in track with your breath. So let's look at this. Do you normally drive more slowly or faster than the speed limit? So some people like to go right at the speed limit. Some people like to go, 5 or 10 miles an hour faster. Some go a bit slower. So this is assuming that the road conditions are okay. What is your normal habit? And is that consistent? Do you kind of normally always do that? I know for a while I had decided that because of the environment, I would drive the speed limit and no faster. So I did that for a long time, and sometimes I still do that, but usually I like to go a little bit more. So when we're looking at this, when we're looking at what comes up around this, why is it that we do that? And then what do we judge other people for? So if we always like to go a little faster, then someone who is going the speed limit is going to be in our way. What do you think about that other person? If we're looking at levels of intensity, someone who's going just the speed we like to go, that's great. We don't have any problem with them. Someone who's going faster than we like to go, we're probably going to experience some fear. So, what's the matter with them? They're going so fast. Can't they tell that's dangerous? It's reckless. So, we might have those kinds of thoughts. So let's take a moment. What comes up for you when you think about people who are driving faster than you? And then when you think about someone who's driving slower than you are, what are your thoughts and assessments and judgments around that? So we have levels of intensity. So if someone's driving the speed limit and you'd like to drive a little bit more, or someone who's driving really slow, like 10 or 15 kilometers or miles below the speed limit. And what do you assume about those people? What kind of thoughts do you have about those people? So sometimes we might look at an older person, which obviously that's a stereotype. I'm almost 70. I'm that older woman, but I'm not the one who's slowing down and a mile ahead. I'm not nervous in the behind the wheel like that. But if somebody is nervous about driving, and we see this when the traffic conditions, like the weather, for instance, if it's icy or snowy, we might see that. But sometimes we just see it all the time. There are people who just never feel comfortable going the speed limit, and so they go a little bit slower. So, what do we feel about them? What is our, not the politically correct response of compassion and understanding? Well, of course, they get to drive the speed that they want to. But the actual response when you think about that. So, let's take a moment to sit with that. We don't actually know why people are doing what they're doing, why they've chosen to drive the speed they're at. What does your mind tell you about that? And then let's go into this really important question that I think is at the bottom of a lot of this. So if you look at this from the angle of that person doesn't care about what I need. And sometimes we'll find ourselves talking to them in our head. Don't you know I'm going to be late? Like, get off, move aside. You're holding everybody up. So if our needs weren't considered and we're powerless to change something, that can trigger a real feeling of helplessness, of I don't exist for that person. They don't care. So in our logical part of the brain, we don't, I mean, obviously that's silly. Of course they don't care about us. They're doing their thing. What does that generate in us? Here I am in a situation where somebody else is in my way, whether that's traffic or in a store or someone is talking all the time and doesn't want to listen to us, doesn't want to include us. All of those different elements. This comes up in a lot of different ways. Our needs aren't being considered. It's like we're objectified or we don't exist for that other person and they don't care about the impact of what they're doing on us. There might be memories that come up or images or thoughts about different times that happens. What does that feel like in your body? And if you were to visualize that person in front of you, that person that's in your way, just kind of pull back from your impatience and sit with. There might be things that we don't know about that. It might be someone who's really worried about something. It might be somebody who's is aware that as they're getting older, for instance, that they need to be a little more careful. Their reaction times aren't as much. And nobody would want to push somebody into an accident. And we have this kind of feeling of impatience oftentimes. And impatience is a bit too light of a word. Sometimes we get enraged or people get enraged at other drivers. It really triggers a fight response. Notice the whole experience. And you might want to do some tapping if there's some kind of persistent thoughts. Put something into a frame, notice the space around that. What does this activate in you? Why do you get so irritated when somebody's in your way? And then let's pull back from that a bit now and see if you could feel some understanding and empathy for yourself. These don't make sense a lot of the times. A lot of times we're kind of ashamed or embarrassed that we react the way we do. And when we suppress that, it's not helpful either because then we'll never know what it is that's creating this environment in us. Take a few deep breaths. If you want, you could stand and shake it out or do something to kind of release it out of your body. And this is something that you could do as a practice when you're driving. I often do that. And I have a lot of slower drivers on this road. There's nowhere to pass except for one little short place. And so I get a lot of opportunity to really just sit back and work with this. Number one, I'm almost never in a hurry. And I can just kind of slow down and look around and notice what's here. I can work with my breath. There's so many different ways that we can work with this. But I just get to accept the fact that I don't control the speed I get to go for a while. Somebody else is controlling that, and I don't necessarily like it. But if I don't let go of that resistance, then I'm going to have a really tense, awful experience. And if I can let go of that to the extent that we can let go of that, we're not triggered into these kind of contracted, painful states as much. Right. So this is back to what Michael Singer's saying about this. So, number one, to stop fighting with the causes that disturb your mind. And when we don't fight it, it actually can release. And the other thing is something that we do a lot of here is that we witness our experience. So we witness thoughts, we witness sensation in the body, and we experiment with and practice being a witness instead of getting really over involved in a train of thoughts, for instance. So when we relax back into the seat of consciousness, we remember that we're witnessing and that we're experiencing our life. We're not at a distance from it, but we can focus. It's like at the beginning when I did that, focus on the stillness within and then focus on something lovely and then focus on something that irritates you and then come back and do that. A lot of our experience is really affected so strongly by where our focus is. So if we can let go of the weather or the drivers or whatever it is that activates these states of fight, flight, freeze primarily, then we can let go of our reactions to that. And then a lot of times it will just dissolve. We don't have to do anything about it. We can just continue to drive or continue to breathe or continue to be aware of that.